West End. Atlanta this morning, the sun rose like a hot coin on the window ledge. I stood in my empty apartment. The walls gave my voice back to me, even the words I never dared to say before. The carpet was rolled up. The curtains were down. The old paint smell mixed with dry wood. The space between me and the door felt wide and clear. I took a slow breath, steady like a person learning to walk on a tightrope. Then I put a thick folder on the bare kitchen counter. The doorbell rang. My son, Darius, 38 years old, shirt still creased, walked in fast, like he was chasing himself. Keisha came behind him, arms crossed over her chest as if holding her heart in place. "Say it, Mom." Darius threw his words at me, tight like a guitar string pulled too hard. "How could you sell the apartment? How could you—" I didn't jump in. I set my phone beside the folder, looked him in the eyes, and spoke softly, like setting a glass down. "There's a second piece of news you need to hear." The air froze. A neighbor's clock ticked once, dropped its sound into our empty room, and clicked like a latch. In that moment, I knew I had crossed the line of silence. Before, whenever my son checked his watch, I would smile and rush to pour more tea. Today, I stayed quiet, strong and dry like a sun-baked rope, not afraid to hold. If you're watching this opening, pause for a beat and ask yourself, what could make a 5-year-old mother change her voice, her stance, even her breath? Sometimes family betrayal doesn't use knives or shouts. It comes with a calendar invite, a polite smile, a sentence like, "When it's ours," said like a business plan. If you want to follow the whole story and see how that second news flips the board, hit subscribe and leave a comment. Boundaries equals love with discipline. Don't look away, this talk won't be loud, but it can change a life's direction. Darius stepped closer. Keisha swallowed, fingers tight on her purse. "You promised this apartment was for us," Keisha said, voice shaking. "You can't." I didn't promise. I still didn't raise my voice. The old wood floor creaked under my feet, as if this old apartment stood with me, a witness for all the years I lived quietly without asking for answers. I pointed at the folder, the sale contract, the transfer receipts, the investment statements, all numbered with color tabs. Each page was a step I built myself to climb out of the theater of hoping. "And before you say more," I added, "I have this." I tapped the screen. On the counter, the phone lit up, ready to play the voice recordings I had once pressed with shaking hands and still pressed anyway, like a person closing their eyes to cross a bridge. These last days, I practiced a strange skill, listening to my heartbeat without telling it to hush. While waiting for the papers, I learned even old wood has a flavor. Warm like the nights we drank black coffee, sharp like the day rain poured through the vent. I tied up my memories with a simple bow and put them in a box labeled, "Stay with me," not "Stay with the apartment." When the movers carried the last chair out, the room spoke a clean truth. I never truly had a place here, not while I let other people decide my tomorrow. "Give the money," Darius said, dry now like throwing a hammer to the floor. "The money from the sale." I looked at his hands. I had watched those hands grow, hold a pencil, hold a steering wheel, hold a phone. Today they shook, not from cold, but because a pillar in his mind got pulled like a loose brick. "Son," I said, "an inheritance is not the right to own your mother's feelings." The words fell and stayed, flat and sure, like a smooth stone set in the right spot. Keisha turned slightly away. Her shoulders curled in. "You see, some wounds only start to heal when we bring them into the light. Family betrayal isn't only an act, it's a kind of language. It's easy sentences, neat plans for the whole family that forget to ask one hard question. Where is the mother in the whole family? I learned to trim extra words, should, must, of course. What's left is one short sentence, no. I lifted the folder, slid the cover aside, and showed the bold line, "Transfer complete." I didn't wave it like a win. I set it down like hanging a picture straight on a wall. Darius gave a rough laugh, the sound of someone who just lost the map. "You're ruining our future." "Your future as a couple," I said, "cannot be built on your mother's ribs." Keisha took a deep breath. Tears touched her lashes but did not fall. I knew she was afraid of losing the plan, not really afraid of losing me. But I also knew fear can teach a person to stand up when it's put in the right place. Right here, I want to play part of the sounds this apartment used to swallow the whispers they thought no one heard. I pointed toward the phone, then paused. "Do you want to listen with me? Stay a few more minutes. When the recording plays, you'll see why family betrayal doesn't always explode like fireworks. It can soak in like fog. And you'll see why one sentence, "There's a second piece of news," is enough to turn a life in a new direction. If this opening touches your own story, hit follow and drop a comment. I listened, so I know you're walking through this door with me. Next up, the recording plays, and the truth stands up. It's coming right after this. I rewind to a few months before that morning, when the empty apartment echoed like a seashell. Back then, West End still held my old habits. Black coffee and a wheezy percolator, mopping the floor in the same line as the sun through the window bars, and waiting for a knock I thought was love. Darius was always 15 minutes late, always saying, "Traffic." Keisha brought a grocery store bouquet wrapped in noisy plastic that sounded louder than her words. "Mama Alma, your place feels so warm." I wanted to believe. Older people aren't always hungry for food. Sometimes we're hungry for a human voice. The little signs came first. Keisha looked around the living room like she was taking inventory. She touched the sofa arm and said, "Vintage," in the way people use to mark down the price. "When we redo it, the light will, if we redo it," she smiled, her shirt smelling like fabric softener. Darius sat down and scrolled his phone. He asked about my health with his eyes stuck to the screen, nodding after each answer like a metronome. I poured more coffee into an old cup with cracked glaze. The cracks looked like river maps. I served smothered pork chops the way Thomas liked, but Keisha tapped her fork twice and stopped. "So rich, huh, Dee?" Darius nodded. "Yeah." They talked about furniture sales, and my name stood outside the story like a lamp in the corner. One Tuesday afternoon, the door opened without a knock. I was in the bathroom. I heard footsteps, plastic bags scraping a chair, Keisha lowering her voice. "Be honest. If this place were in our name, then we could finally live." Darius laughed the way people tap a spoon on a glass. "Mom won't live forever. It'll be ours one day." I put my hand on my chest so my heart wouldn't break. The water kept running, and through that rushing sound, one hard thought came clear. Family betrayal doesn't need a weapon. It uses time like a slow drip of acid. I walked out as if I hadn't heard. Keisha spun around and turned on a smile. "Mama Alma, we were going to take you to the store." Darius didn't look up. He said to his screen and asked to borrow a pen to note some specs of the apartment. "What specs?" "Afternoon light, outlet spots, cabinet width." I answered with a thin smile, like onion skin. They stayed 10 minutes, left a few when we replaced this lines, and went away, leaving a louder kind of empty behind. That night, I took out an old leather notebook from my work days. Soft cover, pages yellow like honeycomb. I wrote the date and time. I wrote short lines. The words, the eyes, the chords of how they spoke. I wasn't writing to be bitter. I was writing to bear witness. By page 3, my hands shook less. Evidence makes you feel less alone. At least you can see the thing you've been carrying. 2 weeks later, they changed their tone. Keisha started with a pretty hug. "Mama, 2 bedrooms are too big for just you. Move to a more cozy place. And this one, we'll buy it at a family price." The words, "family price," were a silk scarf covering a knife. Darius added, "Think of it as an advance on the inheritance. Less hassle later." I took a deep breath. "I'm not ready," I said, not sorry and not asking permission. Darius's face fell like an old theater curtain. "Don't be selfish, Mom." A clear tear stood in Keisha's eye. "We dream of a family. The kids need a yard," she said, voice fitted like a stage line. I didn't argue. I opened my notebook and drew one calm line. They used the word family as a verb to move me out. After they left, I sat by the window and listened to cars mixing with wind, the city's song that never says sorry. I understood that if I stood still, I would be convinced by neat stories. I needed a base stronger than feelings. I decided to be my own investigator. The next morning, I went to the bank to update a few things. In the line, 2 women were talking. My mother-in-law sold her house, bought a small condo, and she's traveling with the rest. The younger one said, half proud, half wishing. "Whoa, if mine did that, the kids would kill her," the other joked. The younger one asked, "Serious now? It's her money, her life, who gave the right to make her ask for permission?" The question flew down the hallway like a needle and pinned me in place. I took it home and set it on my table like a new prayer. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and searched a few agents. I called Terrence Cole. His voice was steady, the kind of steady that helps people open doubtful doors. He came the next day, took photos, measured, listed pros and cons. Sell fast, about 270. Fix a few things, maybe more. I nodded. Sell fast. He was a little surprised, the professional kind that doesn't turn into judgment. A week later, he said a couple, Jamal and Aaliyah Carter, had cash. I signed. The pen on paper made a small sound, like scissors cutting an invisible string, while Darius called hard and often, and Keisha texted long messages with sad emojis. I copied contracts, opened an investment account, and filed papers into tabbed folders. I wrote down amounts, transfer dates, saved confirmation emails. I also learned to press record. Not to shame anyone, but for the first time to hear the truth in their own words, not filtered through love. I named the files in order. 1. Don't see me as a person. 2. Family as the reason. 3. Advance inheritance. Keisha's messages came thick. Photos of a suburban house, a lawn, a backyard. The kids will run here, she wrote, though there were no kids yet. Darius switched to commands. Close the deal. Stop delaying. I answered with blank space. I didn't explain anymore, because explaining inside a wrong frame only makes you look guilty. I let each message fall like a leaf. I logged the time and saved the proof. One rainy night, Darius spoke loud over the phone. Mom, rates are going up. If you don't sell now, you miss the best chance for everyone. I looked out the window. Drops hit the glass like rushed commas. I said, my best chance is learning to live without making everyone happy. The other end went quiet for 2 full breaths. Then he hung up. The busy tone buzzed like a burning wire. I learned another habit, walking the apartment like a person saying goodbye, touching the walls, the counter edge, the place where Thomas used to hang his raincoat. I talked to the space, half joke, half truth. If you were here, you'd pat my back and say, Alma, sign it quick. After signing, I packed only what was truly mine, our faded wedding photo, the porcelain cup he bought at a fair, the Bible with his date of passing. I gave away the rest. The lighter I packed, the steadier I walked. The day Terrence said, the money landed. I opened my banking app and watched the green numbers appear like a calm answer. I bought a 1-bedroom in Cascade Heights, bright small kitchen, neat like a new thought. In the middle of moving, I set a new beat inside me, the beat of a person who manages her boundaries. When Darius called to invite me to dinner to make it up, I already knew the next act. People often change the script, not the goal. I said yes, not to explain, but to look straight at things. In my wallet was a small USB with the recordings. In my bag was a flat folder with the papers. In my chest, surprisingly, was quiet. After all the small daily humiliations, a person either shrinks forever or grows like a cactus, little water, still blooms. If you ask why I didn't cut ties earlier, it's because family betrayal often wears a care mask. It says, for Mom, for the kids, for our family. I had to write, to listen back, to look at the green numbers to know which 4 was real. Once I knew, the rest was logistics. Box up, sign, transfer, keep quiet until the empty apartment made that thick echo. The road to that moment wasn't one big turn. It was a line of small footprints, a raised eyebrow at a vintage sofa, a dry laugh of, Mom won't live forever, a bankline question, who gave the right to make her ask? I followed those steps, slow and sure, and stopped exactly where I needed to, at the kitchen doorway, saying, there's a second piece of news you need to hear. Behind me, an old life shut with the dry click of a switch. In front of me, I saw myself not as a piece in someone else's plan, but as the person writing my own. Terrence Cole showed up at noon the next day with a laser measure, a small camera, and soft shoes that didn't make a sound on the wood floor. He moved around my West End apartment like a tailor taking the last measurements for a suit precise. Neat, no extra talk. If you want a fast sale, he said, eyes on the baseboards, I'd price it around $270. With cash, we could close in 14 days. I nodded. Sell fast. He looked up, a little surprised, then nodded back the look of a man who knows this decision isn't sudden. It's the final stitch after 1,000 careful seams. I signed the listing agreement on the bare kitchen counter. The pen made a dry sound on the paper. Click, click, like a door latch catching on its own. No more drafts. Terrence explained the steps, the photos, the showing schedule. I listened and wrote in my leather notebook, time, contact, requirements. When I reached the family section, I turned to a blank page. I wrote one short line, Family is a place where if you're not careful, love can be used as a lever. I underlined it. I closed the book. On photo day, I opened the curtains, wiped the counter, and set one empty glass on the table like a polite greeting. The photographer clicked away. Terrence offered a few soft words to make the room feel welcoming. I stood back in the hall, looking at the wall where our wedding photo once hung, now only tiny nail marks like old moles once covered. I thought of Thomas, my Reggie, and heard him in that moment. Alma, let the light speak. 2 days later, Terrence said a couple, Jamal and Aaliyah Carter, wanted to see the place. I made coffee out of habit and told myself not to pour any. This was no longer a home for long talks. Jamal walked around. Aaliyah touched the wall and said, "The light here is beautiful." I felt the difference right away. They spoke about living, not about fixing me out of my own home. By late afternoon, Terrence texted a short line, "They're paying cash." Wind pushed through the door crack as I read it, and inside me I felt a cool, enough-sized space open up. I texted back, "Agreed." The signing took place at a law office on Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard. Across the table, Jamal smiled gently. Aaliyah held his hand. I signed, they signed, and Terrence slid the papers back and forth like a steady musician. The lawyer confirmed. The seal pressed down. The sound was low and sure, like a dancer's last step on stage. "Transfer will finish this afternoon." I nodded, put the pen down, and in that moment some invisible string slipped off my wrist and fell to the floor without a sound. Back home, I opened my banking app. $270,000 glowed like an answer that needed no defense. I moved $175,000 to pay for the new place in Cascade Heights. 1 bedroom, square kitchen, a window looking at a thin willow branch like Wynn's signature. The rest, over $100,000, I placed in a low-risk investment plan, the bank staff suggested. I took screenshots of each step, printed them, added tabs. Everything lined up like a well-run classroom. I felt grateful for order. It is the armor for saying no with facts. While papers moved along, my phone got busy in another way. Keisha's messages stacked up like ribbons, each one a picture of a lawn and children's voices that didn't exist yet. The crying face emojis fell like afternoon rain. "Mama, don't leave us. We really need that house." Darius switched to commands. "Close it. Don't delay. The family is waiting on your decision." I put the phone on the table, tapped record before each call, and answered with neutral lines. "I'm thinking. I'll update you when it's done." I stopped arguing inside a bad frame. I saved my strength for the day and placed where the right sentence needed to be said. I started packing. I didn't hire movers to box things. I wanted to touch each item and decide what comes into my new life. 1 box for essentials, 1 for giveaway, 1 small box labeled, "Stay with Alma." In that small box, I put the cracked porcelain cup, a photo of Reggie in his cap smiling, and a half-finished handkerchief I was sewing. In the kitchen, I took down the wall clock that had been wrong for more than a year. The hands dropped softly into my palm like a lesson. Some things don't need to run right to be right. Right on time, the money hit. I signed for the Cascade Heights apartment on a plum-colored evening. The place was empty, floors clean, window open, the paint smells soft like a polite ask. I set the key on the sill, touched the wall, and whispered, "We start again." That night, I brought the first bag. Not much. Sheets, towels, a Bible, the leather notebook. I placed them slowly, like setting letters in a brand new sentence. I slept there the first night and dreamed I crossed a wooden bridge, hearing the boards creak without fear. The next morning I went back to West End to finish up. The old apartment was so empty you could hear your own breath as a kind of measure. I walked through each room, touched the switches, and turned off the lights like turning off the habits that kept me stuck. Suddenly I saw the shape of family betrayal more clearly. It starts with, "This is best for all of us," grows with, "Advance the inheritance so it's easier," and hardens with, "Don't be selfish." Mom, I once believed those lines because they wore the mask of care. Today I gave them their true name, demands, and I gave my own act its name, self-rule. My phone buzzed. "Terrence, the Carter's paperwork is set. You can hand over the keys tomorrow afternoon." I stopped in the living room and looked at the doorway into the dim hall. "Thank you, Terrence. You work very neatly." He laughed softly through the line. "Honestly, you worked neatly. I just followed and arranged." I hung up and felt a warm spot in my belly, the feeling of someone who tied her own shoelaces without needing anyone to bend down. At noon, Darius called. His voice was tight, but I heard a tired streak in it. Mom, we picked a house. Deposit this week. You have to decide now. I opened the window so the wind could sit between us. I already decided. The silence on the other end stretched, then the old but distant question. Decided. What? I spoke slowly, letting each word find its place. Decided to sell. Decided to buy a new place. Decided to keep the rest for my old age. Decided to live. I heard quick breathing, then footsteps. He was pacing like a lion moved to a new cage. Mom, you can't do this. I looked at the printed bank statement on my table, my name, my account number, the stamped confirmation. I already did. At dusk, I carried the last box out of West End. On the stairs, a child rode a red toy bike, humming a song with no clear words. I stopped and listened a moment. I felt light not because I won an argument, but because I stepped off a chessboard I should never have been playing on. In the parking lot, I set the box on the back seat, started the car, and drove toward Cascade Heights. The road felt longer, but green lights met me at surprise turns. That night, I hung a simple bulb from the ceiling, opened the new kitchen cabinet, and made a small pot of soup. The smell of fried onions clicked like a tiny lock opening. I poured water and set 2 glasses the old way, one for me, one for memory. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll label the file folders, sort the drawers, change the door chime. I smiled. People say freedom is a big road. I think freedom is sometimes just a small kitchen, a key with your name, and the right to say what I will do next without asking anyone. In the new apartment, I put my leather notebook on the table and wrote one line, end of the cell chapter, start of the live chapter. The West End apartment felt like an empty oyster shell. I leaned on the counter. The file folders were lined up. My phone lay flat. Morning light stretched in a long stripe. Fast footsteps in the hall, then the door flew open. Darius came in first, tendons tight on his wrist. Keisha followed, arms across her chest like she was holding her breath in place. Mom, Darius said, voice rough with anger, how could you sell the apartment? You know we... I didn't interrupt. I motioned for both of them to stop a few steps from the kitchen. We'll talk right here, I said, pointing to the tile. Don't come closer. Don't touch the papers. I heard my own voice, not loud, but sharp, like a knife that was just sharpened. Keisha pulled in a hard breath. Mama Alma, money pressure is choking us. Please help us. This place, it was our family dream. I looked straight at her. A family dream can't be built on one person's fear. I put my palm on the blue folder. Sale contract signed. Wire received. My new place in Cascade Heights closed. The rest invested. I tapped each point like a steady drumbeat. Darius leaned forward. Then hand over the money. You say you love me. Prove it. I shook my head slowly. Love doesn't mean paying every bill for you. Love means teaching you to take responsibility. He gave a dry laugh. What right do you have to teach me? I'm your son. The inheritance is mine. I picked up my phone and turned on the screen. You're mixing 2 words. Inheritance is later. Right now, this is my property. I pressed play. The sound filled the empty kitchen like water. Keisha's whisper from that day, when we redo this, the light will. Darius's answer, Mom won't live forever. In the end, it'll be ours. Every ours hit the white walls and came back like a boomerang. Keisha went pale. Recording us like that is disrespectful. Disrespectful, I repeated, is planning to take this home while I'm still standing here cooking for you. I pressed the second clip, Darius's voice smooth as oil. Advance the inheritance so it's easier, no paperwork. I stopped it. Easy words often hide demands. Demands aren't asking. Keisha began to cry, tears falling exactly where they were meant to. Darius swallowed and looked around the empty room like he just noticed the echo was real. Mom, he said softer, we don't have anywhere to go. Son, I said, if you have nowhere to go today, it's because you tried to build a future on a home that wasn't yours. I pointed to the folder. A future can't stand on someone else's property. He clenched his fist and took a step. I raised my hand, palm out. Don't come closer. We'll use short sentences. He stopped 1 step later. Keisha looked at me like I was a new road sign set in the street. So you're cutting us off? Keisha sniffed. We want to start a family. Don't you want a grandchild? I don't want a child used as bait, I said, even and calm. If I have a grandchild, it's because you want a baby, not because you want to unlock my bank account. I pressed the third clip. Darius's dry laugh, Keisha's whisper, family price, then fix everything. I hit stop. The word family is beautiful, but when you use it to push me out of my own home, it becomes a tool of family betrayal. No one spoke. Only the neighbor's clock ticked through the wall. Darius stared at the colored tabs sticking out of the folder like they were a fence. Are you trying to make it so hard we give up? I'm making it clear, I said. Boundaries aren't to make life hard. Boundaries teach people the right path. Keisha's hands shook, but her voice got smaller. If we say sorry, could you loan us money, with terms, with papers? I looked right at her. Borrowers need a payback plan and a history of respect. You don't have the second. The first is a bank's job. Darius laughed again, bitter this time. You've changed. You used to be soft. I didn't get softer. I was compressed, I said. Today I spring back to my true shape. Wary tenside. He snapped. So what do you want? You want us to kneel and beg? I want respect, I said. From you two, and from myself, for myself. The air shifted. I felt the power lines flip like a light switch, old light off, new light on. I stacked the folders. Neat. I pulled out a chair and sat. Now Mom talks. You two listen. I set the rules like a teacher taking roll. 1. The phrase, advance the inheritance ends today. 2. If you want to visit, make an appointment, no surprise drop-ins. 3. Any money offers, if there are any, go through a bank, not my kitchen. 4. Stop using the word family like a free pass. Keisha wiped her tears, unsure. So, are we still your family? I have note in 75. Family doesn't disappear, I said, softer, but family privileges can be taken back when they're abused. That's also the lesson of family betrayal. Love needs discipline. Darius stared at me a long time, like seeing a stranger move into his mirror. I don't know what to say, he whispered. Good, I said. When you don't know what to say, you can start with silence, then learn to listen. He turned away, paced, then faced me again, voice small. Mom, if I go see a therapist, will you think I'm acting? I think you're looking for a door, I said. If that door leads to responsibility, I support it. Keisha bit her lip. And us? Do we still have any chance to earn your trust? Hand raised in. Trust needs proof, I said, resting my hand on the folder like a hand on my chest. Today I brought my proof. Yours let time and actions write it. A warm, dusty breeze slid in under the door. I remembered one more thing and smiled. You said I'm ruining your future. No, I pulled one wrong brick out of the wall. Now you can build again with your own bricks. Darius lowered his head and spoke to the tile like a confession. I thought your place was our backup plan. It turns out it was the only plan, because I was too lazy to make another. I stood and put the phone in my bag. When you stop using other people as your backup, you start making a real plan. No one owes anyone a whole life. I opened the door and let the light pour in like an answer that needs no footnote. We're done for today. I have to hand over the keys. Keisha glanced at Darius. Let's go, she said quietly. At the threshold, she turned back, eyes no longer acting. Mama Alma, I understand at least part of it. Good, I nodded. Understanding a part is the start of understanding enough. They left. The door closed with a low hinge note. I stood still and listened to the last echo drop and fade. In that quiet, I knew the showdown ended exactly when it should, not to win an argument, but to bring gravity back to my own life. I smoothed the folder and put it in my bag. Family betrayal had been called by its right name and put in its right place, and when the truth stands in the right place, you don't have to shout for anyone to hear you. The art studio sits in a red brick house near Hammond's House Museum. The front steps have old paint marks, like piano keys that played many songs. I arrived 15 minutes early, holding an empty cloth, bag brushes, paints, and palette would-be class loans. A wooden sign on the door read, Celeste Vaughn, Open Studio, No Perfection, Only Discovery. I paused. No perfection, only discovery was exactly what I needed after closing the West End place and opening the door to Cascade Heights. Inside, it smelled like linseed oil, canvas, and fresh coffee. Tall windows pulled in the breeze from Ajar Park. Miss Celeste Vaughn wore a paint-spattered smock, hair in a high bun, eyes bright, the kind that can see through invisible walls. Hello, Miss Alma, she said, touching my elbow like finding a rhythm. Today we paint with the non-dominant hand. I laughed the first unguarded laugh in weeks. You want me to make life hard? No. Celeste tilted her head. I want your body to lead before your mind tries to control it. There were 6 students, all women over 50. Ruth Ann Parker came over, short curls, a sea green scarf. You're new? I'm Ruth Ann. Heard you moved? I nodded. Yes, and I changed how I breathe. Ruth Ann laughed, a bell-like sound. We'll breathe with the brush. 2 into 9. Class started with wrist shakes and shoulder rolls. Celeste put a 50x70 canvas, a paint set, and a rag in front of each of us. Only one rule, she said. No rules. Then she taped my dominant hand so I wouldn't forget. I held the brush with my left hand. It felt like writing a letter in someone else's voice. The first stroke trembled, like a stranger's signature. By the 3rd second, I heard a small sound inside me, a soft sigh, like a thread slipping out of a needle. Celeste circled and stopped by me. Miss Alma, don't fight it. A shaky line is information, not a mistake. I loosened my shoulders. The brush slid sometimes like a feather, sometimes like a knife edge. Black with indigo, a touch of umber. I was quietly painting empty rooms and the dry echoes of West End. Celeste said, You're painting an old story. Give it edges, then pull in a window. I dabbed white, a thin slit like light through a curtain. 2 hot tears jumped out and dropped onto the canvas, leaving small blooms. I felt shy. Celeste set a tissue box on the table. Tears are a good solvent. Ruth Ann leaned over. I called my first piece Darkness with a Door. When you title your work, leave a few words room to breathe. I nodded, liking how she said let words breathe, as if words needed oxygen too. After 40 minutes, Celeste put on light jazz. New exercise, she said. Paint the same theme, but use your whole arm. Lead with your shoulder, not your wrist. We stood, took big brushes and swept wide. I felt another window open in my chest. Deep reds and warm oranges mixed and crashed, like the sound in my head whenever someone said, family price, advance the inheritance, or don't be selfish. Mom. I wrote a small word into the wet paint with the brush handle. Demands. Then I wiped it out. Only a faint trace stayed. I knew family betrayal has its own language, and now I was letting it wash away, like a wave over fresh sand. Mid-class, Celeste handed me a piece of sandpaper. Scuff the surface, give the painting some history. I rubbed. Thin layers lifted and showed older colors like peeling back the days I thought I was wrong for saying no. The surface grew rough and caught the light in a new way. Celeste nodded. See? Scars, remember. Use them to join things, not to tie yourself down. During the break, Ruth Ann poured coffee. You moved to Cascade Heights? Yes, I said. A window facing a willow, a small kitchen, a new lock, and quiet. Quiet is good, Ruth Ann said. But watch that loneliness doesn't plant seeds there. I watched the foam circle the rim. I have this class, I said. I have Celeste. I have you. Loneliness won't find room. Ruth Ann tipped her chin at my canvas. You just set the first brick. Set or stained. Part 2 was composition, how to place things. Celeste gave us 3 small canvases and asked for a triptych. Darkness, chaos, freedom. Don't tell the story with your mouth, let color speak, she said. I started darkness with black-blue blocks holding onto each other, a few white scratches like fingernails. I added 1 tiny yellow dot at the spot where I used to sit by the window waiting for a knock. For chaos, I used wide strokes, colors colliding, slanted lines like a jumpy audio recording. I drew 1 curving path, the road I drove away from West End in a small rental car, leaving split piles behind. For freedom, I made a bright base, a band of gold and pink across it, and a few green dots like silent nods. I added a small open window, no one outside pushing me. Celeste stepped back 3 paces, looked, and said softly, Miss Alma, you've moved from recording evidence to recording your being. I laughed. That sounds big. It isn't, she said. It's the work after a language-level wound. Your truth needs a new home, not just a file folder. As we packed up, Ruth Ann waved me over. On Saturdays, I walk Cascade Springs Preserve. Come, not to run away, just to walk until long sentences get shorter. I nodded. I need to learn short sentences. Perfect. Ruth Ann smiled. Short sentences survive. The next week, the task was self-portrait without a mirror. Celeste said, "Paint how your face feels when you say the right sentence." I remembered West End when I said, "An inheritance is not the right to own your mother's feelings." I felt my shoulders drop one notch. My strokes turned into steady squares with soft edges inside. I knew that piece would hang in my new kitchen, right where morning light passes, so I remember how I said it. No shouting, no shaking, just exact. After class, Celeste asked me to stay. "Would you join a group show? Next month I'm hosting Neighbors and Notes. Each person hangs 3 works and tells their journey with the fewest words." I hesitated. "I'm not ready." Celeste smiled. "No one is ready before they're ready." Ruth Ann overheard and chimed in. "Sign up, Miss Alma." I already did. I exhaled. A door in me opened another notch. Okay. That evening in Cascade Heights, I set the triptych on a temporary shelf and sat across from it like 3 friends. Darkness whispered, "Don't fear that we once existed." Chaos chuckled. "Without me, you wouldn't know the road." Freedom stayed quiet, the clear kind of quiet. I made a pot of tea and poured 2 cups out of old habit, one for me, one for memory. Today, memory didn't ask me to pay with my future. On the corner of the table, the file folder still sat, tab flags like a row of signal flags. I touched the cover, grateful it saved me when I needed it. Then I slid it into a drawer and set the paint box on top. I had finished the defense phase, now came building. I picked up a brush and wrote small on the edge of freedom. "Forgiveness is opening a window, not removing the bars." The sentence fit, like the last tile on a roof. Night fell. Cascade Heights was quiet like a clean page. I lay in warm yellow light, listening to the ceiling fan and my heartbeat. Far away, a train horn drew a long line and faded. I thought about a weekly call I hope to get from Darius, calls that don't ask for anything, just check in. I thought about a letter I might get from Keisha, no sad emojis, just her new work schedule. And I thought about myself, about tomorrow when I'll walk back into the studio and paint again with my non-dominant hand. The body remembers the way home before the mind. When my left hand paints and my right hand rests, I hear the most important thing. I am living, not just surviving family betrayal. 1 week after the self-portrait without a mirror class, my phone rang at 7:58 p.m., the time I chose for all family calls. The screen showed Darius. I took a breath and answered. His voice was low and slow, like someone learning where to put commas. "Mom, I just left my first therapy session." I set the teapot down. "Okay, you don't need to share details if you're not ready." "I want to share this." Darius paused. The doctor said, "I use other people's plans to fill my own empty spaces, and I use the word family like a ticket to skip the toll." My Cascade Heights kitchen felt bigger by 1 notch. "When you heard that, how did you feel?" "Ashamed," Darius said, not hiding. "But a healthy kind of shame. It doesn't make me shrink. It tells me to clean up." I heard someone's steps in the hall, a door closing gently like a soft period. "Where will you start cleaning?" "Money." Darius gave a small laugh. "I'm taking a Tuesday night budgeting class at the community center. I also picked up Saturday shifts. And I turned off all alerts from house for sale pages." "Good," I said. In my head, I put a small check mark next to actions. "How often will you call me?" "Once a week. I won't ask for anything, just so you know I'm here." "Doing the work." "Good," I said again softly. When the call ended, I touched the file folder wood, then closed the drawer. The papers had done their job. Now it was time for new habits to speak. 2 days later, I found a handwritten envelope at my door. Keisha, Turner, Robinson, the word Turner underlined once, like a small statement. I made tea and opened the letter. The paper had no perfume. The ink didn't smear. "Mama Alma, I'm sorry for the days I used the word family not to hold people but to push them. I met with a career counselor at Goodwill. Next week I start a 3-month medical coding certificate. Darius and I are staying in different places for now. We don't blame you. I'm writing to say I will learn to stand on my own feet. If Miss Ruth Ann has a class called Short Sentences Survive, please sign me up. Keisha." I folded the letter. Inside me I heard a small click, like a switch snapping out of an old habit. Not a break, a fit. That afternoon, Ruth Ann and I went to Cascade Springs Preserve, like we planned. The path was cool and green with moss. Water ran close by like a moving strip of light. We walked slow. listening to leaves. I told Ruth Ann about Darius's call and Keisha's letter. Ruth Ann smiled, head tilted. Good news comes with actions. Good news with actions, I repeated, letting the words land just right. You know, for years I thought I was selfish for wanting to keep my retirement money. Turns out, I was just keeping oxygen to breathe. You went through something like a language injury, Ruth Ann said. People called their demands filial duty, closeness, helping. You gave those things their true names. We stopped by a large tree. Someone had carved "Be kind" in the bark with a small knife. I touched the dark letters. Kindness, I said, doesn't mean permission. Right. Ruth Ann smiled. Kindness has boundaries. That night, Darius texted photos, a therapy receipt, and a budget notebook with needs, wants, savings columns. Under it, he wrote, proof of work, not words. I sent one line back, keep going. Then I turned off my phone and went back to the chaos painting that was still wet. I added one thin stroke like a thread, the line where I learned to speak in short sentences. On Sunday, I went to the small church in my area and sat in the third row. The pastor preached about the prodigal son, but added a line I had never heard anyone stress. Coming home is the child's job. Opening the door is the mother's choice, but locking the door is also her right if the child returns to steal. I smiled to myself. Some words make you feel protected by your own self. Near dusk, the phone rang. Darius. Mom, I just cut up my store credit card. I also asked my boss for extra shifts. And I want to say sorry not because you're mad, but because I was wrong. I stayed quiet for a moment so the small tremble in my chest could settle. I'm listening, I said. I treated inheritance like a tool to control you. Truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of the empty space after Dad died. I tried to fill it with easy plans. I looked at the shelf where darkness hangs, with one tiny yellow dot like a late-night light. Fear isn't bad, I said. It's only dangerous when we turn it into a rule. Darius sighed. I won't ask you for money anymore. If one day you choose to help, that's fine. If not, that's the boundary. I promise. Good. This time I added a sentence I never dared to say before. I'm proud you chose the hard lesson. On the other end, I heard a soft laugh, like a cap popping off a bottle. Thanks, Mom. The call was short, clear, not messy like a straight line drawn with a ruler. Another evening, a call came from an unknown number. Monique Turner here, Keisha's sister, without the old judging tone. I just wanted to say, Keisha really started the class. She sent me her schedule. Monique paused, searching for words. I'm sorry, I said, you betrayed your child. I understand, I said. We often confuse family betrayal with loving discipline, especially from far away. Thank you for calling. Monique exhaled. If you need anything in West End, tell me. I won't just talk big like before. I hung up and opened the window. Night wind carried a smell of rain. I realized, when you fix the language inside you, the world around you changes its frequency too. At the studio, Miss Celeste Vaughn announced a Neighbors and Notes night. I signed up to hang 3 pieces. Celeste gave me an artist statement form, limit, 25 words. I spent the whole noon boiling my words down to seeds. I left the old apartment and the abused word family. I keep the window open and the boundary true. I live without asking permission. And as oppressed, that evening, Keisha sent a long text, her class schedule, a photo of her desk, and an unpaid internship form at a clinic after the course. At the end, she wrote, "Thank you for saying no. If you had said yes, I might never learn to do anything well." I sat a long time with that sentence. For years, I thought sacrifice was the language of love. Sometimes the right no is the best classroom. On Neighbors and Notes night, the small gallery on Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard felt warm like a palm. Neighbors, classmates, and a few strangers stood before each triptych. Darius came early, wearing an old shirt, freshly ironed. He stood in front of my darkness, chaos, freedom for a long time. "The middle one," he said softly. "That's me." "Good," I said. "Seeing where you are in the story is the first step." He nodded and pulled a small card from his wallet. I printed a promise to keep with me. I read it. Don't ask for money. Ask back my character. I looked at my son, the 8-year-old man, learning self-respect, and felt a steady light inside my chest. Not bright, strong. Late that night, back in Cascade Heights, I hung the 3 paintings in their places. On the shelf, I set Keisha's letter and Darius's card. In the drawer below, the file folder stayed quiet like a foundation. I poured water and set out 2 cups. This time, the second cup was not for memory. I set it for tomorrow. Because I understand. After the storm of family betrayal, people do not go back to who they were. They become a clearer version of themselves, fewer extra words, more full stops. And I, Miss Alma, am learning to place the period in the right spot. At the end of clean phone calls, at the end of promises with proof, and at the end of a day lived without asking anyone for permission to feel enough. Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard glowed like a line of handwriting running down the street. The small gallery for neighbors and notes felt warm like a palm. Fresh canvases hung thick on the walls. Miss Alma arrived early with Ruth Ann Parker. Miss Celeste Vaughn checked the lights, turning the dimmers so each set of paintings had space to breathe. My triptych hung near the window. Darkness, chaos, freedom. Below it, the 25-word artist statement read, I left the old apartment and the abused word family. I keep the window open and the boundary true. I live without asking permission. Neighbors came in small groups. An older lady in a red beret, Mrs. Dot Williams stopped at darkness, leaning in. You painted the breath of a quiet room, she said, her hand tracing the black-blue blocks. I smiled, feeling my throat warm. Mrs. Dot, that breath once made me think I had vanished. She nodded. No, you only changed where you stand. The doorbell jingled. Darius walked in pressed shirt, shined shoes. He looked around like someone entering a place built for calm words, not shouting. I didn't rush over. I let him choose his path. He moved slowly to my 3 paintings and stood a long time at chaos. In that piece, I had slanted lines like sound waves from our recorded talks, mixed with bands of color showing the route away from West End. He raised his hand but didn't touch, holding it like a person near a drop of rain. The middle one is me, he said softly. I heard but waited. I wanted him to keep reading. I see the slanted lines like the times I called you just to give orders, and the dark red is when you hit record. He gave a small, sour smile. It doesn't bleed, but it learns. I nodded. Learns to name things, learns to be quiet. He took a breath, eyes still on the paint. I brought this. He gave me a small hard card, the one I had hoped for, a line printed on it. Don't ask for money. Ask back my character. I slipped it into my wallet next to my ID. Right place, I said. Your character belongs close to your name. People gathered and asked questions. A college girl asked, What word did you wipe off in chaos? I smiled. The word demand. Quiet laughs. I added, when that word disappears on the surface, it still sits underneath, but the top is now free for something else. I pointed to freedom, a bright ground, a band of gold and pink, a little open window, for light to pass through without asking anyone. Miss Celeste Vaughn stepped back 3 paces and clapped once, like a conductor ending a phrase. Miss Alma, she said, loud enough for those nearby. You moved from defense to building using color to sort your language. Then to the crowd. Anyone who has lived through family betrayal knows why the middle piece is noisy and the last one is quiet. A middle-aged man standing by Darius asked, You the artist's son? Darius nodded. The man grinned. Congrats, artist blood. Darius didn't joke back. He answered plain, No. Study blood. I'm learning not to use the word family to skip the toll booth. My heart tightened, then eased like a guitar string tuned to the right note. In the crowd, Ruth Ann handed me a cup of water and whispered, Look, our kid can read. I smiled. Yes, reads without showing off. A little later, Monique Turner, Keisha's sister, appeared at the door. Her eyes didn't carry the old judging look. She stood back and gave me a small nod. I nodded back. No words needed. In the guest book, I saw a line I knew. No more using family as an excuse. Be well, Kay. I didn't know if Keisha came quietly or asked someone to write it, but I understood. An old language had just been unsubscribed. When it was time to share, Celeste asked each person to speak under 60 seconds. When it was my turn, I said only, I hung 3 pieces to remind myself. Darkness when yes is too loud. Chaos when a new no still shakes. Freedom when the short sentence is enough. Then I stepped back. The clapping wasn't loud, but it landed clean, like a period. After the main part, jazz played. Ginger cookie smells drifted from a side table, mixing with coffee and dry canvas. Darius walked a loop, greeted a few people, then stood by me at the window. Streetlights reflected on the glass. Our two faces laid over freedom behind us, as if we were inside the frame, inside that gold-pink band. "Mom," Darius said, eyes on the glass, "if I once asked you to forgive me just to get money, then today I ask you to forgive me so I can learn to stand." "Forgiveness isn't a shortcut," I said. "It's a map. You still have to walk." "I'll walk," he said. "Next week is my 3rd session." I turned in forms to join a steadier work group, fewer odd hours, more regular shifts. He laughed. "Why am I giving a report?" "Because you now know the difference between responsibility and explaining your situation," I said. "Responsibility comes with numbers." He nodded, not hurt. "I have numbers, and I have this sentence." He paused, careful with the air. "I'm proud of you, Mom." I stayed still. That praise didn't make me float. It rooted my feet deeper. "Thank you," I said. "I'm proud you chose the right words at the right time." A little girl tugged Mrs. Dott's sleeve. "Grandma, that little window is too small. How can I crawl through?" Mrs. Dott laughed and bent close. "Windows aren't for crawling, they're for looking out." That line burst into tiny light and settled on every wall. Night deepened, people thinned out. Celeste turned off a few lights, leaving a soft glow on each triptych. I wiped the frame edges and tightened the hooks. Darius waited at the door. "Ready to go, Mom?" "Ready," I said, then remembered. "Take a taxi, okay? I'm stopping by Ruth Ann's for a bit." "Okay." He looked at me this time like one grown up to another. "You don't need to tell me anything else." "Right," I nodded. "I don't either." On the sidewalk, the breeze was light. Ruth Ann and I walked to the lot, each holding a small bunch of wildflowers from the gift table. She leaned over. "Tonight your paintings did the file's job, called things by their right names." "Call the right name, put it in the right place," I said, "and leave the rest quiet." Back in Cascade Heights, I hung the triptych where it belonged. Below it, I placed Darius's card and Keisha's letter. I poured 2 cups of tea. The second cup tonight wasn't for memory, and not for tomorrow. It was for conditional trust, just enough to move forward, not back. I sat facing freedom. In the small window of paint, I could almost see a thin dawn, gentle, not showy. I know this. Family betrayal once made me think I had to shout to exist. It turns out, when truth stands in the right place, the voice can be low and still carry far. Tonight, that voice isn't from my mouth. It comes from color, from boundaries, from small habits, and from a 3-8-year-old man learning to stand under his own name. Sunday morning, I woke up before the first light. The window at Cascade Heights was open a little. Cool air slipped into my small kitchen, with the smell of young willow and the soft steps of a jogger in the hall. I set the kettle on the stove and waited for the familiar whisper. I placed 2 cups like a small ritual, one for me, one for the part of tomorrow that always sits with me. On the shelf, my 3 paintings, Darkness, Chaos, Freedom, stood in a row. Below them, Darius's hard card said, "Don't ask for money, ask back my character." Every time I looked, that line felt like a brace, straightening a spine that used to bend under sweet, fancy words. I put on my walking shoes and reached Cascade Springs Preserve, just as the mist hung over the water like a thin scarf. Ruth Ann Parker was waiting, hands folded, eyes bright like a person who knows how to find her own light. We didn't talk for a few minutes. We listened to the water whisper and the leaves settle on the ground. A few days ago, the neighbor girl asked me, "Why do you walk so much, Miss Alma?" I said, "So my heart can hear itself." Today, I felt the answer grow. I walk so my heart doesn't lose its voice under all the shoulds and musts. "Has Darius called?" Ruth Ann asked when we stopped by a dirt turnoff. "Last night," I said. He turned in forms to move to a steadier shift, dropped the odd hours, and keeps therapy like clockwork. I smiled. His voice isn't iron anymore. It sounds like both feet on the floor. Ruth Ann nodded, then laughed. "Do you notice between you and your son, no one has to shout to be heard now?" I thought of old texts, the demanding calls, the crying face emojis aimed right at the softest spot. For a moment, the old anger passed by thin as a cloud and faded. "I thought love meant putting up with things," I said. "Now I know love means putting the fence in the right place." I touched a mossy trunk. On the bark, someone had carved "Be kind" with a small knife. In my head, it translated, "Kindness has boundaries." We walked on. When we crossed a wooden bridge, my phone buzzed. Keisha, Turner, Robinson. I glanced at Ruth Ann, gave a small sorry nod, and picked up. "Mama Alma," Keisha said. Her voice didn't carry the drama of the past. It had the honest, tired edge of someone learning a trade. "I finished week 1 of medical coding. I'm sending my internship schedule. And I moved into my own place. Not to test you, to test me." I watched the water slip under the bridge. My chest felt light. "Good," I said. "Independence isn't an attitude. It's a work schedule." Keisha laughed, a real laugh this time. "I'm learning short sentences. The first one is, 'I'm responsible.'" She breathed. "I know you don't need an apology anymore, but I still want to say thank you for saying no. If you had said yes, I might never learn how to stand." I closed my eyes for a second. "Congratulations," I said. "Stay on the path, don't run, walk." After the call, I stood still and listened to my heart beat slow, like a bell rung by a careful hand. "Good news?" Ruth Ann asked. "News with actions," I smiled. At noon, we stopped at Hammond's House Museum. In a small gallery room, I saw an oil painting of a woman at a window with a suitcase behind her. I stood there a long time, thinking of my own suitcase, not one for running away, but one for coming home to a place that matches my breath. Ruth Ann stood beside me in quiet. Some paintings do the talking for you. In the afternoon, I went home and made mint tea. Late sun cut through the thin curtain and laid gold bars on the floor. I opened my leather notebook and wrote, "I do not owe anyone proof that I deserve my own space." I used to set 2 cups, one for me, one for a memory that never had a seat. Today, the second cup was for conditional trust. Trust others when they bring proof, and trust myself even when no one claps. That evening, Darius called. "Mom, I'm not calling to report," he said first. "I just want to share a small thing. I almost bought expensive shoes today." I stopped and asked, "Need or want?" "I picked the cheaper pair and put the rest in my emergency fund." He paused, then added, "And I realized every time I said for the family before, I really meant because I was lazy to choose the hard thing." "Good," I said. "You're learning the difference between sugar-coated words and truth you have to chew." He laughed. "I learned slow but sure. Next week, can I come see your paintings again?" "Not to ask, just to look." "Yes," I said, "but make an appointment and bring a loaf of bread. I'm making soup." "Deal," he said, light. After the call, I slid the file folder straight in the drawer. It was no longer a weapon. It was foundation, proof that I walked through the storm on my own feet. I wrote a new kitchen version of my artist statement, not a tight 25 words, but the sentence I want to tape above the stove. "Forgiveness is opening a window for the wind. Forgetting is tearing out the frame. I choose the wind, not the storm." The next day, Mrs. Williams visited with a bag of ginger cookies. Her eyes smiled like she invented smiling first. "How's your son?" she asked while arranging cookies. "He's learning to stand," I said. "What makes a man stand up straight?" "Mrs. Dot put her hands behind her back like a teacher with a riddle. "Self-respect," I said, "and a mother who knows which door to open and which lock to turn." She nodded, quiet for a moment, then offered a gift of a line. "Sometimes, for a child to stand, a mother must step out of his path, not turn her back, stand in the right place." In the afternoon, I made chicken soup. I thought of Reggie Thomas of the old days, Reggie of my heart now, and heard him say, "Alma, don't salt too early. Let it melt at the right time." I laughed. The kitchen felt bigger. The soup simmered, smelled soft. I broke bread and set down a quiet dinner I chose on purpose. That night, when I put my phone on silent, I thought about the word family. Once, it was like a shared umbrella that everyone wanted to hold but nobody kept straight in the wind. Now I see family as a ribbon. Whether it holds depends on how tight and clean the knot is. If the knot is loose, it becomes a messy excuse. If the knot is right, it keeps what should be kept and releases what should be released. 1 full year after I said, "There's a second piece of news you need to hear," I decided to host a small tea. Miss Celeste Vaughn came early with wildflowers. Ruth Ann brought lemon cake. Darius arrived on time and set a paper bag on the table. I didn't know what to buy, so paper pads. "So you never run out of surface." We laughed. Keisha didn't come. She sent a short text. "On night shift. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Worry about your soup." That was enough. I didn't need more. We sat and talked. Celeste asked, "Alma, what will you paint next?" I looked at Freedom Thought and said, "Another window. A little bigger. Still a window." Darius added, "Not a glass wall?" I shook my head. "Glass walls are pretty, but you can't hang curtains. I like closing the curtain sometimes to rest." After tea, everyone left. It was just me and the apartment. I washed the dishes and pulled the curtain halfway. Outside, the street lay steady like a line of ink. I sat at the table and wrote, "Date. I chose to live. No permission slips. No proving. No acting." I put the period in the right place. After clean calls, after promises with proof, and after each calm day I cooked for myself. I stopped and listened to the fan and my heartbeat. Family betrayal once tried to teach me that my worth was measured by how much I could endure. I refused that lesson. I chose another. My worth is measured by how well I care for myself, so I can care for others in the right way. Night gave space to early dawn. I opened the window. Damp, cool air slipped in with distant cars. My phone lit up. Budgeting class reminder. I laughed. It wasn't my class, but Darius's. He added me as a remind contact, his way to keep a promise. I tapped seen and pictured my 8-year-old son walking into class, sitting in the front, opening his notebook on time, a quiet image, but to me, a graduation. The next Sunday, church read the verse about everything has its season, I added softly, and boundaries. Walking out, Mrs. Dot called, "Alma, park later to feed the birds?" I nodded. People say, we shrink when we get old. I don't agree. I think we trim what we don't need so the rest has room to grow. That night, I set a small camera on the shelf and recorded a short monologue for my channel. I spoke about windows, folders, soup, and calls that end at the right time. I didn't speak loud. I spoke just enough so people could hear the quiet space between sentences. "If one day," I asked at the end, "the person closest to you uses for our family to shove you out of your chair, what will you do? Sit and let them keep pushing, or stand and set the chair straight?" I stood not to leave, but to place the chair right and sit again, with my back straight. I turned off the camera. Across the way, neighbors' windows glowed like piano keys. I realized I've talked about doors and windows all along. A door means a passage between one side and the other. I smiled. I closed the old door, opened a new one a little, and learned to stand at the threshold long enough for my eyes to adjust. I don't fear the dark now. I only need enough light. And if I switch the light off too soon, I know I can switch it back on. I learned where the switch is. Before bed, I added one last line. My freedom doesn't need noise to prove itself. It proves itself through small habits: washing the cup, closing half the curtain, calling at 8, silencing at 10, and setting the kettle on in the morning. That's enough. I closed the notebook and set the pen on top like a small stone to keep the page from flipping on its own. In the soft dark, I heard my own voice whisper, "Thank you for not leaving me." And if this story meets you somewhere at a stove, on a wooden bridge, or in front of a small freedom, remember, there is one thing that must be called by its true name to be put in its right place, and that is family betrayal. When we name it right, it steps back like a shadow. What stays in front is the life we build with our own hands, one small habit, one short sentence at a time. Next time, if you want, I'll share the day Darius brought a small guest to my door, a little girl who asked, "What is a half-open window for?" I answered, for the first time in a long time, to let the wind in and to let the right people step through. If this story helped you, please subscribe so we can sit together by a bright window each time a new episode drops. If something didn't sit right, leave a comment. I'll read closely and revise with care. Still not sure? Tap like as a gentle nudge. I'll learn and make the next videos closer to you. Thanks for staying until the last line. There are more stories on your screen now. Pick one, and let's keep walking forward together.